Hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to a closer look video, closer look video. And tonight we're looking at one of my absolute favourite bands. I've been going through quite a few bands that I enjoy and like lately. Bands like Talking Heads and the wonderful Lou Reed. But there are certain bands that have followed me throughout my life. Obviously, David Bowie, we've been through. Gary Newman, I've still got to do some videos of him. I want to go through my sort of my CD collection of him, and then go through my DVD collection with him of what I have. So I want to do those. But Joy Division are a band that were a massive part and influence on my music taste. When I got into music, you all know the story of my music, and I fell in love with pub rock first of all, Dr. Feelgood, bands like that, and then I went through the post-punk scene because I discovered artists like Ian Dury, XTC, bands like that, and amongst them was Joy Division, and Joy Division were just a bit darker. Their lyrics were very dark and very sort of like appealing for a young lad that felt a bit different than the rest of normal kids of my age and young people my age. I was always felt alienated, hence that's what attracted me to Bowie and Newman. And Joy Division also were in the same vein as those. They become very important to me. Now, Joy Division are probably one of those bands, a bit like The Sound, that have the real sad sort of storyline to their career. Obviously, Ian Curtis is most people know who Ian Curtis is, the lead singer of Joy Division. Unfortunately, he had a few major health issues. He had mental health issues with sort of manic depression, if you like, extreme depression, and he also suffered from epilepsy, which he didn't discover till later in life. Ian started off working for the council. He was like, he worked with people with their benefit claims, I believe, in housing and things like that. He actually worked trying to help people, and he had a love of music and stuff, and I believe the band's how it started, it gets explained in this documentary. If you've not picked this DVD up, this is a documentary on Joy Division, which I really recommend you getting if you can get a chance to pick it up. It goes through the story of how they formed, how a couple of them, Peter Hook and that, and met at a Sex Pistols gig, and they couldn't play any instruments, but because the Sex Pistols were sort of like really couldn't play their instruments very well at the time, it influenced them to go on, and they advertised for a singer, and they that's when they met Ian Curtis, and he come along and brought his lyrical sort of talents along to the band. And a lot of these songs, just like The Sound, if you as you know, Adrian Borland of The Sound unfortunately also suffered from these illnesses, and both Adrian and Ian Curtis ended up taking their own lives, which is extremely sad. And yeah, but anyway, we'll get on to that maybe later on in the video. And you can hear his troubled soul throughout his lyrics. You can feel his pain, his struggling, a bit like Adrian. Like I said, I compare both bands are quite similar in a lot of ways, not necessarily all musically. Musically, The Sound were a bit more kind of melodic and were along the lines of bands like the Chameleons. Joy Division were like no one else because they started a genre. They were post-punk, but I believe the goth music scene really kicked off after Joy Division. I'm not saying they were the first gothic band, because there are bands before then that I think were heavier influences. Slade, for one, and bands like this, Bowie, I think all these kind of wonderful bands, even Roxy Music, probably kickstart a lot of the goth scene, and even crooners like Leonard Cohen and things like this. I think were all the start of the goth scene. But this was the band that came through with the sort of really dark, deep lyrics and music. And when you listen to them, you can hear bands in there. You can hear The Cure. You can hear Sisters of Mercy. You can hear Bauhaus. You can hear all these bands in Joy Division. They must have all been listening and maybe visiting and concerts of Joy Division. Unfortunately, I never got to see Joy Division. I did see their incarnation band after that, New Order. Obviously, when Ian took his life, the band still wanted to carry on, and they moved Bernard Sumner into the lead vocal and lyricist and songwriter with Peter Hook, and they went forward and formed New Order and became extremely big and popular. But I think Joy Division would have done the same. I just think they would have done exactly the same. But unfortunately, it didn't happen because of what happened with Ian. It was the end of that era and that music. But they did leave us with a couple of classic albums that altered my life. We're going to be looking at both of those albums today, and a compilation album that they released after those albums, and we're going to be looking at a live album and a box set, and we'll also look at the visual stuff I've got here, a Blu-ray and a DVD. So before we waste any more time, let's have a deep down look and a closer look at Joy Division. So here we are, going to take a little closer look here at Joy Division. So this is their debut album, Unknown Pleasures. I don't think I've got my glasses with me, which is a real shame. Oh yes, I do. So this is the collector's edition, which came out a few years back, a double CD. These do need reworking on. With today's technology, these can be reworked and made in even better in quality sound. But yes, these are the editions we have. This is probably their most iconic cover, which is explained how it was created in the documentary. So it was a plain sort of cover, as you can see, nothing written on the front. When I did have this on vinyl, I did buy it on vinyl, and I was intrigued by the cover. I didn't know what it was. It was at a time when I was listening to Kraftwerk and bands like that, and this was in the punk section, and I thought, okay, this looks a bit strange. It doesn't look really punky, but I bought it anyway because I turned it over and it said Unknown Pleasures Joy Division, Factory FACD 10. So people say, oh, this was the first release from Factory. It wasn't. They've released compilation albums before this of like singles and stuff like that of different bands, and I also believe they released an EP under a different name. Before they became Joy Division, and I think they had a single out as well before this, if I remember right. But this was their first album. It comes in this sort of deluxe set here with the original album on CD, and you also get a live concert at the Factory, Manchester, live, 13th of July 1979. Anyway, the track listing for Unknown Pleasure is side 1, you have Disorder, Day of the Lords, Candidate, Insight, New Dawn Fades. And on side 2 is She Lost Control, Shadow Play, Wilderness, Interzone, and I Remember Nothing. So that was the album, which was produced by Martin Hannett and engineered by Chris Nagle. And it was recorded in Strawberry Studios, Stockport, by Joy Division and Peter Saville. It's a classic. It's an amazing. It might even be the best debut album ever made. I'm not sure. I mean, to me, it's up there for me. To me, it's really, really important. It was one of those albums that I fell in love with on first listening. And like I said, it comes with a live CD, which has the tracks Dead Souls, The Only Mistake, Insight, Candidate, Wilderness, She's Lost Control, Shadow Play, Disorder, Interzone, Atrocity Exhibition, Novelty, and ends with Transmission. Also has like a little booklet in there. There you have Peter Hook. There's the factory, which was like a little nightclub, I believe. Started off like a nightclub. We have an essay from John Savage in this. And there we have the guys in their rehearsing studio. Looks like we've got Stephen there, Peter there, Bernard there, and Ian there. Stephen Morris was a drummer. And like I said, a nice lengthy essay, which is really, really nice. And that's what comes in the booklet. And it's a fantastic album. It's just one of those albums that just change everything. You know, before then I was heavily, like I said, into pub rock, and I was getting into things like Ian Dury and things like that. And I was still loving my Bowie records, but then this came, and I discovered this before Newman, if I remember right. I remember getting this, must have been near the end of 1979. I can't remember the year the album actually came out as its release. I'm sure it was 79, 78, something like that. But yeah, I remember buying it because I liked the cover, and it just changed everything. It was so dark, and like I said, because it was sort of like almost alien-like, it was like, wow, I've never heard anything like this. You know, it's so dark, and the lyrics were kind of like really emotional and in depth. And they meant some, you know, a lot of things I didn't know what about, like she lost control. I didn't know what the song was about. I thought it was his girlfriend or wife going crazy with him. But now later found out it's about when he worked at the council in the office. He had an appointment there with a woman, a mother and a daughter. And whilst they were at the appointment, the daughter had an epileptic fit. And I believe that's what that song was about. And then he discovered, very bizarrely, after that incident, that he also suffered from epilepsy. He started to have epileptic fits. He even had fits on the stage in a few concerts and things like this. So on top of depression, and he was married, he had a young child. He was so young. He was married like about 17, 18, maybe 19. He was married too young, you know, and his relationship was strained by the band's sort of automatic sort of like recognition, getting well liked, and then doing tours and meeting people. And, you know, I believe he met a German journalist at some point. I'm sure that's what happened, or she could have been French. And he was torn, and with depression on top, and all these sort of things that are open to you, drugs, alcohol, will come to you when you have the money, when you're in a band, I suppose, all came too much for Ian, and sadly took his own life in his own house. Not long after, I think, the release of the second album, or it might have been just before the release of the second album. So, you know, we're talking a couple of years the band were going, and that's it. But anyway, this is incredible, amazing, amazing album. So their second album that came along after that was an album called Closer, which is this album here, which this is an amazing cover. Now I believe this is from a cemetery in this picture of in Italy. I believe it is. I think they visited Italy and they took a picture of this amazing statues that are in this sort of graveyard or sort of mausoleum in Italy, I believe. And that's where that amazing cover comes from. Again, it on the front cover it had Closer, and Joy Division was actually written on the back. So it's kind of strange, isn't it? Like, you know, you don't want to push your name up front. You know, you put it. It was never really relevant to them, because to them they were just a band that just made music, and that's all they wanted to be remembered by, was for making music. I don't even know if they were after the fame thing. I don't know. I must apologise if these look a bit battered, because they are. Like I said, these have been out a number of years now. I think these have been out about 2000 and, I don't know, 17 maybe. I want to say even earlier maybe. We do need some re-releases from these. No, 2007. Yeah, these have been out. I've had these since 2007. So these are nearly 20 years old already, these albums. That's why they're looking a bit battered, especially the next one. It's really battered. I must apologise. But they're still cool, and they're still the best versions we have of these albums. This also comes in a double disc, which has the album Closer and has a concert, University of London Union, live 8th of February 1980. You've got to understand that they didn't have loads. They only done 2 albums and some singles, and so that's all we have of Joy Division. So that's why with these editions, instead of being unreleased tracks and stuff like that, we have concerts, which is still good. Although I've got to say they are a bit rough, but you've got to understand that there was no way of visualising what was going to happen with Ian. I don't think they were visualising to even record the band at that stage as a live concert. Later on, yes, they would have done, and they probably would have released proper live albums. But so they had to go on with what they had, and a lot of them were sourced from bootleg tapes. Some of them could be from soundboards, but yeah, none of it was really like planned sort of like albums. So when you listen to these, just remember the quality are not going to be of top quality live albums, but the historical importance of these is more important than the album, in my honest opinion. Really, really cool. Anyway, the album Closer has the tracks Atrocity Exhibition, Isolation, Passover, Colony, A Means to an End, and it also has Heart and Soul, 24 Hours, The Eternal, and Decades. So that is the track listing for the album Closer. The track listing for the live concert in London Union is Dead Souls, A Glass. Glass, I think, was a B-side of a single. A Means to an End, 24 Hours, Passover, Insight, Colony, These Days, Love Will Tear Us Apart, Isolation, The Eternal, and Digital. So that is the concert there, and that's from 1980. Unfortunately, if I remember right, Ian's passing was more around Love Will Tear Us Apart single. I think when that came out, because that was a single, I think he died just before that got released, if I remember right. Someone will correct me. It probably does tell me in the documentary, but I haven't seen it for a number of years, that DVD. I must rewatch it, and I should have rewatched it before I made this video, but I don't go on stuff like that. I go on stuff that is from my heart. That's why a lot of the time it's wrong, but it's from my heart. There's a very sorrow picture there of him. You can almost feel his pain in there, right? So that again, we have another long essay in here. There's the band. So you've got Peter Hook, Ian Curtis, Stephen Morris, and Bernard Sumner. that's the booklet that comes in this album, and that's Closer, and they are the 2 studio albums of Joy Division. But they, what was released after was an album called Still, which is a compilation of like sort of singles and stuff like that, and it does have another live recording on there, which was more of an official sort of recording, although it's still not the best of quality, but it's still pretty cool. And they released an album called Still. Now this is in awful condition, as you can see. Look, it's been stained, because again, I've had this so many years, and it doesn't even say Joy Division on any of the sides there, but it does on the inside. So this was a double album. So the first album is sort of like unreleased tracks and things like that, and it was a double album, so it's laid out like this on there. So that's the double album. This disc here is completely different. It's another live album from Town Hall, High Wycombe, 20th of February 1980. So the whole album is still on the one disc. The track listing of this album, side 1 is Exercise 1, Ice Age, The Sound of Music, Glass, and The Only Mistake. Side 2, Walked in Line, The Kill, Something Must Break, Dead Souls, and Sister Ray. Now that is the album, and then side 3 is the first of the live album, the live tracks, and it was Ceremony, Shadow Play, Means to an End, sorry, Passover, New Dawn Fades, and on side 4 is Transmission, Disorder, Isolation, Decades, and Digital. And on the live album at the Town Hall in High Wycombe, the concert is Sound of Music, A Means to an End, Colony, 24 Hours, Isolation, Love Will Tear Us Apart, Disorder, Atrocity Expedition, Sound Check. We have a sound check next, sorry, of Isolation, The Eternal, Ice Age, Disorder, Sound of Music, and A Means to an End. So you've got a concert on there and a sound check. So that was the release of Still. So this came out as a compilation. So this was pretty much all the stuff that was kind of like not on the albums, apart from, again, it lacks the singles like Love Will Tear Us Apart. I believe even Atmosphere is not included in this set or stuff like that. So it did lack those, but it does have a track called Ceremony, which New Order also went on to play. And there we have a booklet in here again, a picture of Ian there with the lads. And there they are in the dressing room. And we have an essay from John Wozencroft. So a lot of, like it says on here, this was a time-based conundrum of an album. It's just based on stuff that wasn't released, and some of it even was re-recorded and ended up on the first New Order album. Obviously because a lot of the stuff wasn't completed and all this sort of thing, obviously because Ian had already taken his life. And this does break down the tracks on the album. And I think this was released in 1981. And this here they're discussing about the live element of the album, which was from various concerts. And then we have the information about the remastering of this album. And that's the booklet. So that is the albums of Joy Division. Now I do have other releases of Joy Division. I have an album, another album of theirs, which is a live one, which is called Joy Division. This is at Preston, the 28th of February 1980, and this got a release in 1999. I've had this since then. Again, looking all battered, but it's still very cool. Again, the sound quality is nowhere near as good as other albums and live albums should be. Again, because these are all based upon live bootlegs and stuff like this, famous bootlegs that would have got released as albums and stuff like this. It says here, Preston, the 28th of February 1980. This is not a memento. This is a gig. This is not a souvenir or shitty, not at the best of. This is a gig. This is not a bootleg chic. This is just a gig by one of the greatest bands that ever lived and wrote and played. It says on there. I don't know who wrote that, but the track listing on the album is Incubation, Wilderness, 24 Hours, The Eternal, Heart and Soul, Shadow Play, Transmission, Disorder, Warsaw. Warsaw was the name of their other band that they used before they became Joy Division. Colony, Interzone, She Lost Control. Picture of Ian in the middle, and there we have a little bit of an essay there at the end, and it also goes through a little bit about the recording, where it was recorded, when it was recorded. Songs were written by Ian Curtis, Bernard Sumner, Stephen Morris and Peter Hook. This is a proper official release. Again, Peter Saville put in the input for the design. I believe this is on Factory Records. I could be wrong. But just because it says down there FACD 2.6, that makes me think it could be a factory release. But yep, I have that album. And I also have a CD box set, which is this one called Heart and Soul, which pretty much just covers everything that's been put down on on studio by Joy Division. So it's pretty much the albums that we've just been through and unreleased stuff. It comes with 4 CDs and it comes with a book which sits very nice inside this envelope with a sort of TV taken picture of, looks like Manchester, where the band came from. So I'll quickly run through the track listings. On CD1 we have Digital, Glass, Disorder, Day of the Lords, Candidate, Insight, New Dawn Fades, She's Lost Control, Shadow Play, Wilderness, Interzone, I Remember Nothing, Ice Age, Exercise 1, Transmission, Novelty, The Kill, The Only Mistake, Something Must Break, Auto-Suggestion, and From Safely to Where. And disc 2 we have She Lost Control, 12-inch, Sound of Music, Atmosphere, Dead Souls, Comachino, Incubation, Atrocity Exhibition, Isolation, Passover, Colony, Means to an End, Heart and Soul, 24 Hours, The Eternal, Decades, Love Will Tear Us Apart, and These Days. On disc 3 we have Warsaw, No Lost Love, Leader of Men, Failures, The Drawback, Interzone, Shadow Play, Exercise 1, Insight, Glass, Transmission, Dead Souls, Something Must Break, Ice Age, Walked in Line, These Days, Candidate, The Only Mistake, Chance, which is Atmosphere, Love Will Tear Us Apart, Colony, As You Said, Ceremony, and In a Lonely Place. A lot of these I think are probably from different sort of sessions. It does say here, yeah, some of these are from Peel sessions, flexi discs, TV broadcasts, and things like that. So these are different versions. and then you have RCA demos, Piccadilly radio sessions, generic radio session, and John Peel session. So that is what that's made up of. Disc 4 has Dead Souls, The Only Mistake, Insight, Candidate, Wilderness, She Lost Control, Disorder, Interzone, Atrocity Expedition, Novelty, Auto-Suggestion, I Remember Nothing, Colony, These Days, Incubation, The Eternal, Heart and Soul, Isolation, She Lost Control. It says here tracks 1 to 10 were recorded at the Factory Home. Track 11 was at the Prince of Wales Convention Centre, YMCA London. 12 to 14 was recorded live in Bournemouth, and 15 to 19 was from the Lyceum in London. So they're all live, and all those tracks are previously unreleased. Disc 3 is the sessions and things like that, demos. Disc 1 and 2 are the 2 albums, Unknown Pleasures and Closer, plus associated and singles that weren't released upon that set. But I believe there was another set release called Substance, which did include some of those tracks on it. So there we go. So that is the box set. So we'll have a quick look at the book. Which starts off here. Stephen Morris. And then we've got long essays in here about Joy Division. I do quite like the artwork, the way they sort of set it out like it's like they've just taken photos from an old 1980s TV. I do quite like that. Makes it a bit different, doesn't it? Those are different essays and sort of people's feelings about the band at the time, stories about the band there. Again, would have been a lovely picture of Bernard and Ian, but kind of ruined by the way it's been set out. This is an essay called Good Evening, We're Joy Division by John Savage. Stephen, Ian. So as you can see, it's very text heavy, but it's wonderful. And I do like the sort of way it's set out, the sort of hard, harsh artwork in the book. I do like it. And then we go through the songs. These are the lyrics of all the songs. So you have all the lyrics. And that's a picture from the promo video, Love Will Tear Us Apart. And then we've got the discography at the back here, going through all the releases. Different singles and the different sort of releases from the band. It's not the longest discography, unfortunately, as they weren't around long enough. Then we've got a bit of a biography of the band, how they sort of started, and the dates. Sessionography, about all the different sessions they did, radio sessions, John Peel sessions, and what tracks they performed. And a lot of them do appear on this box set, which is nice. Film and TV. That would have been nice, a DVD in here for their TV performances. It goes on about all the different TV and performances that they've done. Then we have Heart and Soul. a bit about the making of this box set, and that's the booklet, and that's what you get within the box set here of Joy Division. And this sits in there a bit like the Faces box set. It fits in its own little pocket there, which is really nice. So that is all my audio releases of Joy Division that I own. But like I said, they have done, there is a documentary available called Joy Division, their own story in their own words, and it does contain interviews with Bernard, Stephen and Peter within the DVD, released from Universal. It's not available on Blu-ray, sadly. The documentary does run for an hour and 35 minutes, and it does have an exclusive extras of 40-minute photo featurette interviews with the band and friends, not included in the main feature film. So that's really, really cool. Doesn't have a Blu-ray release, but what does is Control, which is a film based on Ian Curtis's life and Joy Division, and it's made by Anton Corbijn, who's more famously known for his work with Depeche Mode and things like that. And it stars Samantha Morton. Sam Riley plays Ian Curtis, and also stars Andrea Maria Lara, and it's an award-winning film. And this is the Blu-ray release of the film. So if you really get into Joy Division, I highly recommend picking up the Blu-ray of the feature film. Now this is a European edition because the UK Blu-ray is well out of print. It's out of print, so but you can still pick up the DVD. I believe I do own this on DVD as well as the Blu-ray, but I like it so much that I double dipped and upgraded it to Blu-ray. This would be really nice if someone like Second Sight picked this up. I could see Criterion releasing this more than anyone else, and it would be fantastic if they did, but there we go. And this is a feature film based on the life of Ian Curtis and Joy Division. So that, guys, is my entire Joy Division collection. So that is my Joy Division collection. Yeah, it's not comprehensive. There are other albums out there. I think there's about 2 or 3 best ofs compilation albums out there. I do have one, but I can't put my hand on it. It's the one with the famous picture of them standing on that bridge in the snow in Manchester. And I think it's just called The Best of Joy Division. And I'm sure there's an album called Substance that they did. There's also just like a best of. And I believe there is another Best of Joy Division out there. But I didn't feel the need to buy it. I said because I have the box set and I have the 3 albums in the collector's editions, and I have a great live album, and also I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 live albums of Joy Division, and I have like all the sort of studio stuff that they release, plus I have the documentary and the feature film starring Sam Riley as Ian Curtis. So that's it, guys. They're a very, very important band to not just to me, but to the world, to the music industry. I think they could have gone on to being probably the biggest band ever, but unfortunately some things, Ian had no real control over his mental health, and obviously them discovering he suffered with epilepsy and all these just got too much, and for one person it was just a troubled soul. Now here's the thing, when people say to you, if you could invite 3 people, dead or alive, to a dinner party, who would you invite? This is going to sound a weird one. I would have Ian Curtis there. I would have Adrian Borland there of The Sound, who both took their lives, who both suffered with depression. And I would have Mahatma Gandhi, because he's a very inspirational person to my soul and my life. I've read books and lots of things about Mahatma Gandhi, and I would just love him to sit down and we'd have a conversation and just hope he could ease and not fix their troubled souls, but put their souls at rest and at peace because he was so wise. I would love that. That would be amazing. But there we go. Massive shout out to my lad. Cheers, guys.